Of our sermon series titled 6 Things, where we've been talking about the 6 things that all kids need to become the best adults possible. So I'm going to do a lightning review round to talk about the 5 things that we've talked about ahead of time to get up to the one thing we're going to talk about today. So if you remember, the first thing we talked about was time. That we said that when we give our gift of time to the next generation, it creates memories for them to shape their history and influence their future. We also talked about love. We said that love is the one thing that matters most. If we can give our kids in our lives one thing, it should be our love. Then we talked about tribes, that tribes are really important for all of us, but especially our kids, because it helps them know that they belong. Then last week we talked about Scrabble, and we talked about 2 things because they're inherently connected, words and stories. That the words and stories we tell our kids help shape their direction in life. That the words and stories we use have the potential to build them up or tear them down. So that's what we've talked about in the 5 things leading up to today. And today, the last thing of the 6 things that we're going to talk about is fun. So to talk about fun, that's why we had Ron and Louise do their comedy routine, and I thought it would be appropriate to start with some jokes for you this morning. So I posted on Facebook for you to post some of your jokes. Also asked my good friend Cheyenne, who's a joke master, to come up with some jokes. So some of these have come from Facebook and from Cheyenne. So we'll start with a classic one, and then we'll go from there. So, why did the turkey cross the road? Because he wanted to get to the alien. Okay, I was more so thinking, because, oh, Shine, go ahead. To get to the other side, or because the chicken took the day off. Why is Santa Claus so good at karate?
Because he wanted to go to try to that.
You want to guess? Go for it. Because he had a black belt. You're right, you're right. What is the shark's favorite number?
A hot dog?
A hot dog? That's not a number. 8. Good job. Who is the shortest man in the Bible? Don't think literally. Sorry, not literally. Nehemiah. Yeah. Good. Okay, last one, I promise. So, there once was a little boy who was convinced that he knew God's first name. And so he told his mom this, and his mom was like, how do you know what God's first name is? And he said, Mom, God's first name is Andy. She's like, how do you know God's first name is Andy? She's like, Mom, it's like the song we sing in church. Andy walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed some of these jokes this morning. And doesn't it feel good to laugh? Right, to really laugh and to smile and have fun. Some of our favorite memories are probably when we were laughing, right? Like, some of you probably have times where you made that phrase, laugh so hard you cried, a reality, right? Has this ever happened to anyone? In my family, when my mom thinks something is hilarious, she just starts weeping. Like, and if you don't know her, you're like, oh my goodness, are you okay? But she just thinks it's hilarious, and she just starts crying. So, right, sometimes we laugh so hard we cry. I laughed so hard one time when I was in elementary school, I thought I was going to have to go to the hospital because I was, like, hyperventilating. I couldn't catch my breath, right? So, like, sometimes we have these great moments of laughter. And laughter really is some of the best medicine, right? We've heard that phrase, but it's so true. It's so good for us. Laughter increases our immune system, which I think we could all use some of that this time of year. Could get an amen on that? So it increases your immune system. It elevates your mood, decreases stress, reduces pain. Like, laughter is so good for us. But my question is, if laughter is so good for us, why don't we do it more often? Like, we do other things that are supposedly good for us, right? Like, take our vitamins, or take our morning pills, go to the doctor, eat our fruits and vegetables, try to be active, right? We do this other stuff that's supposedly good for us, but why don't we laugh more if laughter is really some of the best medicine? I think one of the reasons why we don't laugh that much is because we have a serious problem. We have a problem with being too serious. right? You remember when you were a kid and you loved to like laugh and play and have fun, and your favorite relatives were the ones who would like play with you or tickle you and make you laugh so hard that milk shot out your nose, right? Like those are like some of your favorite moments as a kid. But then it's like one day you grew up and you like got out of bed and you're like, you know what? I'm going to be serious now. Because adults are serious. That's what it means to grow up, is to be serious. And so you started taking yourself so seriously. And you started missing out on having fun and playing and laughter. And what that happens to us is it begins to affect our health and the health of our relationships. We're going to talk about fun this morning because fun has the potential to make our relationships, I think all relationships, but especially the relationships with our kids, go deeper. And so if you want to deepen the relationship with the kids in your life, I'm going to encourage you to have fun, to laugh a little bit more, to dance a little more, to play harder, just to have more fun and joy in life. So to talk about this, we're going to turn to the Gospel of John. So if you have your Bibles with you, I invite you to pull those out or to grab one from the back of the pew, and you're going to look for John chapter 2. We'll begin reading in verse 1. And as you're flipping there, I want to talk about how God values fun. You may have heard this phrase before, but people often say God has a sense of humor, right? And sometimes we say that when something happens in our lives. I like to look at creation and I look at something like a hippopotamus, and I was like, God clearly has a sense of humor, right? If God created something like a hippopotamus. And so I believe that God has created this beautiful creative world for us to live in and to enjoy. And in fact, when God talks about our relationship with God, God uses words like to celebrate, to sing, to dance, to worship, to rejoice. Like that's how God often talks about our relationship with Him. And in fact, God in the Hebrew Bible set aside different festivals or holidays or celebrations for the Jewish people to celebrate their relationship with God. So God set apart more than 7 different unique festivals for the Jewish people just to celebrate, to not work, but to enjoy their relationship with God and one another. And so the Jewish people were feasting and celebrating right up until the time of Jesus, and Jesus lives into this culture of celebration. And we see this in John chapter 2. So let's begin reading in John chapter 2, verse 1. On the 3rd day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. So this passage begins on the 3rd day, and what that means is this is the 3rd day of Jesus' public ministry in the Gospel of John. So Jesus has already begun calling some of his first disciples to himself, and one of the first things he does on day 3 is he goes to a party. He goes to a wedding. And so he's at this party, and it's not just any party, right? Weddings are a big deal. If any of you have ever paid for your children's weddings, you know that this is a big deal, right? Weddings can be quite an expensive, elaborate party. And so in Jewish culture, weddings would often begin on a Wednesday night with this huge feast and celebration. And relatives and friends would come from all around, and they would literally come and camp out and celebrate with you for the entire week. They would sing and dance and eat and drink all week long. And so this was the kind of party that Jesus and his disciples are going to on the 3rd day of their ministry. I think it's so powerful. Jesus isn't out preaching in the synagogue. He's not out healing people. On the 3rd day of his ministry, he's at a party. So Jesus is at this party, and then a problem happens. Let's begin reading in verse 3. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." So this party has a problem. They have run out of stuff to drink. There's no more wine to drink. And Mary knew about the problem. She knew she couldn't fix it, but she knew somebody who could fix the problem. So she brings the problem to Jesus and tells Jesus about it. Now this is a huge problem because it was the responsibility of the groom's family to provide enough wine for everyone to drink for the whole week. And if you ran out of wine, you could be subject to public ridicule for years afterwards. That's how shaming of an event this would have been. So Mary knows this is the case, and she brings it to Jesus, but Jesus doesn't think it's his time yet to do a miracle, to reveal his identity as the Son of God. But Jesus does see a solution. And so if we keep reading, Jesus, seeing that there are now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs, in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. The first of Jesus' signs, the first of his miracles in the Gospel of John is to turn water into wine. Not just a little bit of wine, but a lot of wine. 120 to 180 gallons of wine. Not just cheap, inferior quality wine, but the best wine the steward had ever tasted. And Jesus does this to show his identity as the Son of God and to allow the party to continue. And I think what's so significant about this is sometimes when we think about our relationship with Jesus, we think about it very seriously. We think, oh, our relationship with Jesus is very serious. And we are called to sacrifice and suffering and self-discipline. Like, that's what it means to follow Jesus. And there is some truth to that. Our relationship with Jesus is something we should take very seriously. We are called to surrender. But we are also called to the abundant life that God has for us. Let's not forget that joy is a fruit of the Spirit. This is what God desires for us, to sing and to dance and to enjoy our relationship with God and one another. And so, yes, it's important to take our relationship with God seriously, but we also should enjoy it. I'm still processing this in my own brain, and I'll admit I'm a very amateur theologian when it comes to this point, so I could be completely wrong, and so you can just dismiss it. But something I've been thinking about in my own life is I think there's a deep connection between surrender and joy. You see, I think when we really surrender to the life God has for us, that leads to the ultimate experience of joy, which is so much greater and grander than anything we can ever imagine. That the process of surrender, I think, is long and difficult, and there can be suffering that's a part of it, but I think what awaits us on the other side isn't agony, but it's joy and the abundant life God has for us. Like I said, I could be totally wrong with that thought, but that's just been something I'm processing in my own life, of this connection between surrender and joy. And I think that we who follow Jesus should be an embodiment of this joy and life that God gives us. And so Sundays should be some of the most fun days of the week, and Christians should be some of the most fun people in the world, right? If church is to really be a place where we worship and celebrate God together, it should be a fun place to do that together. Sometimes, though, I think we come to church and we think, okay, I have to be very serious, just sit still and be quiet, and I can't laugh or dance. But God desires us to enjoy our relationship with Him and one another. Just because something's set apart as sacred and holy doesn't mean that it can't be fun. And that we who embody God's love to the world, we should be some of the most fun people on the planet. Instead of being so serious or getting a bad rep for being negative or pessimistic or judgmental or hypocritical, we should be some of the most fun people out there, embodying joy as the fruit of the Spirit. And I think when we do that, it makes a difference, especially for our kids. For kids to realize that church can be fun, that it's fun to be a Christian, that other people who aren't yet a part of the church can realize, wow, that's a fun place to go. And those people, there's something different about them because they have this joy in their spirit. And I think it's so important. Fun and joy isn't just important with our relationship with God and one another, but it's very important to our kids. In fact, child psychologists have realized that children, since they're still developing their language skills, they can't always process emotions or things that they're struggling with. They can't always verbalize them. But play is one of the places where children work out some of the problems that they're wrestling with. In fact, if you want to get to know your kids when you play with them, they might open up about some things they're really struggling with. and so important for the life of our kids that playing with them helps reconnect what's been disconnected. It helps reestablish our relationship with them. And kids value play so much that it's one of the most important things to them. Like, have you ever had this experience? Like, maybe you were at a playground one time and you're watching some kids play. And so the kids are playing, having a great time, but then all of a sudden something happens, and one of the kids, maybe your kid, maybe someone else's kid, gets up and starts screaming, "I hate you!" and just starts running around the playground furious at the other kid, right? Have you ever had something like this happen? And you're like, what in the world is going on? You're like, what just happened? And before you can even go and catch up to your kid who's running frantically around the playground, all of a sudden they decide they're fine, they're over it, and they're back playing with their enemy that was their enemy, and now they're best friends all over again, right? This happens with children all the time. It's because they value fun and play more than most any other thing in the world. And so they're willing to quickly forgive and move on so that they can have fun and play with their best friend in the playground. Play is super important with our relationship with our kids and one another. So I want to give you this morning 3 suggestions of how play can open the door to go deeper with your kids and how this can play out in your relationship with them. The first is loosen up. I said earlier that many of us have a serious problem, right? We have a problem with taking ourselves too seriously. And so I just encourage you to loosen up and to not care so deeply about this well-constructed public image that you have of being all put together and serious and proper, but to be willing to loosen up and have fun. It means so much to your kids if you're willing just to throw out the idea of your serious self and just make a fool out of yourself in front of them and play and laugh with them. It means so much to them to see that you care more about your relationship with them than you care about what other people think about you. So I encourage you, loosen up. That means move a little more. Actually, some of the reasons why I think adults, we don't have more fun is because we sit still a lot, right? We just sit at work or sit at home. And psychologist Stuart Brown says that moving actually activates our play response. So he said if you're having a bad day, he said don't just sit there. He's like, get up and jump around a little bit. He's like, when you do that, it activates your play drive, and so you feel better, and you feel better to go out the rest of your day. So move a little more. The other suggestion is to laugh more. My personal suggestion with this would be to hang out with Ron McLaughlin every week, because I think you would laugh more if you hung out with Ron. But if you can't hang out with Ron every week, which I understand, I don't want to put all that responsibility on your shoulders, Ron. So if you can't hang out with him all the time, ask Alexa to tell you a joke, or Google some jokes or fun things, or tell funny stories to your kids. I encourage you to laugh more with the children, especially the children in your life. And then the third suggestion is play more. Now, I know as adults, play is not really high on our priority list, if it even makes our priority list. But I encourage you just to set a time, maybe even just 30 minutes once a week, to play with the kids in your life. To come home from work, change into play clothes, set the 30-minute timer, and just give your kids 100% of your attention and time for those 30 minutes. No telephone calls, no working, no prepping for dinner, no chores. Just play with your kids, and that will speak volumes to them to show how much you love and care to your kids. So, loosen up. Second is learn what your kids like. When you're playing with your kids, it's important to play with them on their terms, what they like to do. And this can be challenging because your kids might like something that you don't like, right, or don't understand. But this is a great way to connect with your kids. So don't force your kids to do something that you like if they don't want to. So don't force them to have a movie night if they want to have a game night with you when you're trying to play with them on their terms. If you have young kids in your life, they might not even know what they like yet. So if you have a young kid, they might not know that they like playing Marco Polo or Candyland or Sorry until you play with them and help them discover what they like. I encourage you to, like I said, play with your kids on their level. So if they like playing Mario Kart or Fortnite and you don't even know what that is, but if you're willing to at least play with them, you might like it, and it might build the relationship to go deeper with the kids in your life. The last suggestion is lose the agenda. Often, as parents and grandparents, we have an agenda, right? We want our kids to be polite, we want them to do their homework, we want them to eat their fruits and vegetables, but sometimes we just have to let go of that agenda just to let them have fun. That connecting with them and having this fun time together can be more important sometimes than all the list of rules and expectations that we have for them. I'm not saying that rules and expectations are bad. We've talked about this before. Kids need structure and boundaries. But sometimes, for the sake of going deeper with the relationship of your kids, if you can set that aside and just have fun with them, that will speak volumes to your children. We're going to close with this story. Remember how we started talking today about one of the shortest people in the Bible as Nehemiah? Well, Nehemiah was actually a real person. I doubt he was actually the shortest person in the Bible. As Loretta pointed, Zacchaeus normally gets the rep for being the shortest person. But Nehemiah was a governor of the people of Israel. And during his time, there was a priest named Ezra. At one point in their history, Ezra stood up to read the book of the law, which was recorded for us in the Hebrew Bible, about the kind of life that God desired the Israelites, God's chosen people, to be following and how to live their life. What happened is that Israel had turned away from God's law and wasn't living in accordance to how God desired for them. And so when Ezra stood up to read this book, people were weeping. They were like cut to the heart and convicted by how they weren't living how God desired for them. This went on for a while as Ezra was reading this book and interpreting it and explaining it to the people. But eventually, as this went on, at one point Nehemiah stood up and he looked at the crowd and he told them, "Go home, prepare a feast, holiday food and drink, and share it with those who don't have anything. This day is holy to God. Don't feel bad. The joy of God is your strength." Nehemiah told the people, in the midst of their sorrow and their grief, to go home, to eat, to drink, to celebrate, and to not feel bad or sad, because the joy of the Lord is their strength. Church, I'm convinced that if we want to have strong relationships, we must root them in joy. If you want to have a strong family, you must cement it on joy. If we want to have a strong church, we must center it around the joy of the Lord, because that will be our strength. My encouragement to you is to not take yourself so seriously, but to laugh and to play and to allow the fun in your life to be a way to allow the relationships to grow deeper and to grow strong in the Lord. Let us pray. God, we thank you for your joy. God, we thank you for creating us, for loving us, for giving us this incredible life that we get to live in your presence. And God, sometimes our life doesn't feel very joyful at all. It can feel depressing or anxious or fearful. And God, we come in those moments and we turn our eyes to you. And God, we ask, even in the midst of our sorrow and our suffering and our pain, that you would give us joy. And God, we don't always know how that happens, but God, we're trusting for you to do that. God, because we believe that when we focus on you, that your joy can become our strength. And so, God, we're asking for that this morning. God, we're not asking for happiness that's fleeting, that the world tends to chase after. We're asking for true, life-giving, powerful joy that will make a difference in our spirits, in our lives, in our relationships with you and one another. So, God, give us that to cling to this week. In Jesus' name we pray.